Hi everyone, Tom here. I'm actually recording this intro while my dad isn't looking. Usually I'm just the tech guy, behind the scenes, making sure the microphone is working. We started this channel recently and he's been working so hard on these scripts. My dad, Silas, has spent his whole life collecting stories, but let's just say he's still figuring out this whole YouTube thing. He doesn't say it out loud, but every morning I catch him checking the channel. He's been quietly hoping to find our first 100 listeners. For him, it's not about the numbers, it's just about knowing there are people out there truly connecting with his words. So, if you're here, thank you so much. It really means the world to us. Okay, I'll let him take over now. Here is Silas.
Hello, I'm Silas. When we look back at the black and white photographs of America in the 1930s, we often see the same things: endless lines of men in worn out fedoras, faces etched with dust and despair, standing against the gray backdrop of a broken economy. But behind every face in those bread lines was a life, a family, and a silent, brutal war to keep dignity alive. Today, I want to tell you the story of Arthur Moore, an ordinary man living on the south side of Chicago in the winter of 1932. This isn't a story about stock markets or banks crashing. It's a story about the war against the cold, the hunger, and the lengths a father will go to for the sake of a child's smile. Let's turn back the clock 90 years to a frozen dawn on Michigan Avenue. It was 4 a.m. The wind off Lake Michigan, the hawk, as the locals called it, was screaming through the cracks of the tenement buildings. Arthur woke up, not because of an alarm, but because the cold had finally pierced through the thin, threadbare blankets, settling deep into his bones. He moved carefully, trying not to wake the rusty springs of the bed, and tucked his coat around his wife, Martha, and their 10-year-old son, Danny. Arthur then did something millions of American men did in those days. He took a stack of old newspapers and began wrapping them around his torso, tucking them under his shirt. Paper, he had learned, was a poor man's insulation. He stepped out into the dark. The scene at Relief Station number 9 was haunting. Even at this hour, the line was already there, a gray, shivering snake winding down the block. Men stood in silence, stamping their feet rhythmically against the black soot-covered snow. This was the invisible army. Men who used to be steel workers, clerks, and fathers, now reduced to numbers in a line. Old Jack, a former factory foreman standing next to Arthur, whispered through chattering teeth, "Morning, Arthur. The hawk is out for blood tonight." Arthur nodded, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "Yeah, I heard the Relief Commission has bacon today. Danny's been coughing all night. The boy needs some fat, some protein." And they stood there, shoulders hunched, waiting for charity as if it were a judgment. 6 a.m. The heavy iron gates rattled open. The smell of industrial bleach and stale air drifted out. Inside, behind a wire mesh cage, sat Mrs. Higgins. In the Great Depression, relief workers like her held the power of life and death. She held a rubber stamp in her hand like a judge's gavel. "Name?" she barked, not looking up. "Arthur. Arthur Moore. Case number 402. Arthur replied, clutching his hat, trying to steady his voice. Mrs. Higgins flipped through a thick dog-eared ledger. Her finger traced the lines and stopped. We're out of meat vouchers, out of white flour, too. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. Mrs. Higgins, please. We didn't get meat last week either. My boy is sick. He needs... Everybody's sick, Mr. Moore. She cut him off, her voice cold and flat. All I have left is yellow cornmeal and canned lard. Do you want it or not? Arthur gripped the brim of his hat until his knuckles turned white. The pride of a man who used to be an accountant screamed at him to walk away. But then, the image of Danny's thin, pale face flashed in his mind. He lowered his head, swallowing the bitterness. I'll take it. He walked out of the station with a bag of gritty cornmeal and a tin of white grease. No meat. Just another week of surviving on watery mush. The basement apartment was damp. The electricity had been cut off a month ago. Under the flickering light of a kerosene lamp, Martha was trying to coax a fire out of wood scraps Arthur had scavenged from the docks. When she saw the cornmeal, a shadow passed over her eyes, but she forced a smile. Women of that era were magicians. They made meals out of nothing. Don't worry, Arthur, she said softly. I'll make fried corn cakes. Danny loves those. Dinner was a quiet affair. The cakes were dry, scratching the throat going down. But Martha had managed to beg some leftover bone broth from the butcher down the street, stuff meant for dogs, and made a thin soup to dip the bread in. Little Danny chewed slowly, looking at his empty plate. Dad? He asked. The kids at school. They said Santa Claus is unemployed this year. They said he had to sell his reindeer to pay the banks. Is that true? Arthur looked at his son. The cornmeal felt like gravel in his stomach. No, son. Arthur lied, his voice trembling just a little. Santa isn't unemployed. He's just tightening his belt, saving the gifts for the kids who really believe. If a man's dignity in the modern world is his car or his house in 1932 Chicago, it was his shoes. Arthur still wore the suit from his office days, but his shoes were finished. The soles had rotted away. Every step on the slushy streets sent freezing water soaking into his socks. He had cardboard insoles inside them. When the cardboard got wet and disintegrated, he stopped to put in a fresh piece. That afternoon, after walking 10 miles to the rail yards looking for day labor and getting rejected, Arthur found himself standing in front of Solomon's pawn shop. He reached into his vest pocket. His fingers brushed against cold metal. It was his grandfather's silver pocket watch. The last thing of value he owned. The last proof that he came from a good family, that he wasn't a bum. He had sworn he would never sell it. But tomorrow was Christmas Eve, and Danny couldn't wake up to nothing. Arthur pushed open the door. The bell jingled, a lonely, hollow sound. $5, the pawnbroker said, squinting through his loop. It's worth 20 easily, Arthur pleaded. It's solid silver. The broker sighed, bored. Look around, buddy. Nobody needs to know the time these days. They just need to eat. $5. Take it or leave it. Arthur walked out of the shop with a $5 bill in his hand. He left his watch, his history, and a piece of his soul on that glass counter. Christmas Eve, Arthur came home carrying a heavy sack of coal, a luxury in itself, and a small brown paper parcel. For the first time all winter, the stove roared to life. The basement filled with real, radiating heat. "Dad!" Danny cried out, running to him. Arthur placed the parcel on the table. Inside there were no toy trains or tin soldiers. There was a small ham hock, a loaf of fresh white bread, and there, glowing like three little suns, three fresh oranges. In the depths of a Chicago winter, citrus was a miracle, a scent of summer in a world of gray. They sat by the stove. Martha wept silently as she tasted the soft white bread. Danny held his orange with both hands, bringing it to his nose, inhaling the zest, afraid to peel it, afraid to ruin its perfection. "Dad," Danny whispered, "it smells like sunshine." Arthur watched his wife and son bathe in the orange glow of the fire. He didn't have his watch to count the minutes of Christmas, but he knew right then and there that he had won. He had traded his past to buy one warm night for his son's future. The blizzards of the 1930s eventually melted away. The economy recovered. Little boys like Danny grew up, went to war, returned home, and built the modern America we know today. But the story of Arthur Moore stays with us. It's in the cardboard inside the shoes. It's in the newspaper insulation. It's in the miracle of a single orange. It reminds us that the true strength of this nation was never found on Wall Street or in the skyscrapers. It was found at the kitchen tables of the poor, where love and sacrifice carried a generation through the longest winter of their lives. I'm Silas. Thank you for listening.